Hi. If so many people are fascinated by the tarot, it is because with 78 arcana, the tarot encompasses the entire human psyche. So it is the most accessible manual of integral psychology one could ever think of. The tarot reflects the psyche, and the most important distinction on the tarot and on the psyche you should understand, it is what separates the minor and the major arcana. Initially, the tarot was a normal card deck that was invented probably around the 12th or the 13th century in Egypt. It arrived to the West, and only 2 centuries after, in Italy, a card maker decided to add 22 trumps to the normal deck to create the distinction that we know nowadays called minor arcana for the old card deck and major arcana for the 22 trumps. That distinction is fundamental because it reflects the most important distinction you should understand for integral psychology. It is the distinction between the mind, that is represented by the minor arcana, and the soul, that is represented by the major arcana. We all know what the mind is. But what the hell is the soul? Technically, the word psychology means the science of the soul. But unfortunately, modern psychology knows nothing about the soul. Because its sole purpose, its sole interest, is the external part of the consciousness, the one we can measure, the one we can assess, the one we can observe in cerebral imagery. It is the mind. The modern scientific psychology is not the science of consciousness, it's just the science of the external part of it, the mind. It's a bit sad, but modern psychology has no soul. The easiest way to understand what the soul is to contrast it with the mind. The mind is the external part of our consciousness. So it is quite easy to access what's going on in our mind. Thank goodness we don't have to pay attention to the millions of mental processing we are doing every day. But we can access it through introspection, through mindfulness, and gain more and more awareness of all those silent mental activity that keeps happening all the time. By contrast, the soul is mostly unconscious, and it is better so, because we may just lose our mind and fall into psychosis if the mind is not ready to bear the vision that it gives. Thank goodness, from time to time, we can also have those peak experience where time and space dissolves and we enter into a realm of existence that is beyond the worlds. But then we have to go back to the normality and try to seek the visions we had at that moment and to reorient our life accordingly. So, if you are interested to the conscious part of the mind, ask the minor arcana. If it is the deep unconscious, it is the major who will give you the answers. The mind is essentially adaptive. That means it's an implement nature gives us to maximize our chances to survive and to reproduce. So if it's adaptive, some minds are more adaptive than others. We can compare them. For instance, the IQ is supposed to measure the capacity to integrate, the capacity to adapt in a school environment. And of course, if you have an IQ of 140, you are probably more fit to attend a mainstream school than if you have an IQ of 60. By contrast, our soul has nothing to do with adaptiveness. What the soul wants for us is that we express our destiny. So what is a destiny? Destiny can be three types of things. For most people, destiny is unknown. Actually, it operates in the background of the consciousness and keep pushing us to unconscious attitude. At one point, those qualities that are expressed unconsciously will raise progressively to the consciousness. But unfortunately, at first, it will take a very disruptive and distorted form of a vice. And this will cause a lot of harm to people around and to ourselves. And ultimately, those dimensions will raise and be turned into virtues. But even following a virtue causes a lot of trouble if we do so. So it's important to know that if we follow our destiny, it is a path which is everything but adaptive, everything but logic. Then, if you want to understand how to adapt better to a situation, ask to the minor arcana. If you want to understand about your destiny, ask the majors. The mind is essentially a machine to learn. As at birth, our mind was able to do barely nothing, we had to learn everything. So the mind keeps learning from any circumstance. It's highly influenceable through education, through attachment figures, through the culture. It also responds to trauma. And our mind carries all the interaction with our surrounding. And it is the part of the psyche that other can alter, manipulate. That's why there are so many people interested in understanding the mind. The mind is conditional and programmable at any moment. By contrast, the soul is already complete at birth, so it doesn't learn anything. The soul gives completely unconditional motivation. That means that when our behavior is motivated by our soul, it doesn't matter if we got rewarded or punished. We will do it anyway because we are expressing an inner motivation. And actually, the only reward is to express it. And sometimes it causes disastrous effect, but we don't care because we express our destiny. That's the motivation. That's completely unconditional. So if you are interested to understand how to reprogram your mind, ask to the minor arcana. If you are interested on what is an unconditional source of motivation, ask to the major. The structure of the minor arcana reflects the structure of the mind. And most of the tarot authors agreed that the main distinction in the minor arcana is the distinction of the 4 suits. And those 4 suits are related to the 4 elements, which was a doctrine of ancestral psychology to explain how the mind was working. The suit of deniers or diamonds represent the physical consciousness, the relationship we have with our body, with the belongings, with materiality, with the source of pleasure, and our necessity to find stability and security. The suit of cups or heart represents the emotional consciousness. All the bonds that we create with our attachment figures, the belonging to the groups, the taste, the values we hold, or religiosity is conditioned by that dimension of consciousness. The suit of swords is related to the element air, and it is all about the intellectual functioning, the logic, the judgment, the opinion we may have about life happen at this level of consciousness. The suit of wands or clubs represent the element of desire, of self-consciousness, of creativity, ambition we manifest in our life. What makes us to will to make a difference. The four suits, denier, cup, swords, and wands, represent the different grade in their element. The number arcana that goes from the ace to the 10 represent the different stage of development in that very element. So if you want to understand which part of the mind is affecting a situation, these number arcana will indicate where. The four court arcana, which are human figure, represent the element in a human form, with the page, the knight, the king, and the queen. They represent the person that will embody some aspect of the element. Unlike the minor arcana, which are obviously fourfold, there is a lot of controversy about the structure of the major arcana. As the fool or the mat has no number, and as there is a 21 number arcana, we propose to order it in 3 lines of 7. Why 3? Because the major arcana are supposed to represent the soul. And the major author about the soul for Christianity is Plato, who explains that the soul is divided in 3 layers, and that is the cause of the whole complexity of human motivation. The lower soul, which is represented by the 7 first arcana, represents the part of the soul and the imagination that is entirely focused on ourselves. It is somehow very selfish, but it's a normal part of our life, just concerned about creating fantasies of self-fulfillment, the type of fantasy we will admit to our psychoanalyst. The middle soul is morally oriented. That means that what matters at this level is to demonstrate we are socially useful. And basically, it is a mix between selfishness and selflessness, because in one way we try to be useful, in the other way we try to be recognized as such, and to demonstrate that we are practicing some virtues. The upper soul is completely detached, completely abstract. What matters at this level is the deep understanding of the functioning of humanity and what can make it better. It has nothing to do with our own little advancement. It is purely selfless. Intellectuals, for instance, are spending most of their time in those levels of the imagination. The 7 columns of the major arcana represent the 7 types of destiny. Destiny is a very strange and alien dimension to psychology. And it stems from an age-old tradition that has been revived by Alice Bailey in her treatise of the 7 rays. She called it the 7 rays of soul, but we prefer to call it the 7 destinies. And basically, every soul contains the 21 or 22 dimensions that are described in the major arcana. But every destiny tends to be conditioned by one of the 7 dimensions that we can find through the 7 columns of the tarot. And we can call those dimensions with the name that Bailey gave them and their number. So the first is will, the second is wisdom, the third is intelligence, the fourth is harmony, the fifth is science, the sixth is devotion, and the 7th is order. That means that if your destiny is conditioned by one of those lines, this line of force will keep haunting you in your life, keep driving you to do things completely irrational. It will be the leading force of your unconscious. So if you don't believe in destiny, lucky for you, you have a life which is quite simple if you believe that your mind is in full control. If you are feeling that there is some underlying force and you can identify which your destiny is, it won't make possible to change the destiny because the line of force is imprinted in our being. And there is no way to escape one destiny. What we can do is to adjust and to leave some place in our consciousness for those blind force that has to express through our life and to try to find a more suitable way to express them. But we cannot get rid of them. No one could escape from his destiny. Now you can have a clear understanding of the main division of tarot. The minor arcana will reflect the dimension of your mind. The major arcana will reflect the dimension of your soul and maybe of your destiny. So, what is the use of tarot for modern psychologists? First of all, the tarot encompasses the entire psyche, included the soul. And the soul is an uncharted territory for modern psychology. The tarot helps us to make the bridge between the modern focus on the mind and the antique focus on the soul. It may help for clinical psychology, for personal development, and for spiritual understanding of what may fit to one and not to the other. In the next video, we will explore with more details the mind, the soul, the destiny, and the very meaning of all arcana.